Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode. Today we're taking on two of the best and weirdest games for the Sega Genesis, Earthworm Jim and Earthworm Jim 2. I really don't know what's taken me so long to get to these games. They're just so freaking rad, and I guess I was always nervous of not doing them enough justice, because that's just how astonishing, awesomely creative, and groovy these games really are. Here's the deal, alright? Earthworm Jim just blows away its players with shockingly fluid animation, a wide variety of stage settings and concepts, plus its music is straight up filthy, dude. Like, it's disgustingly good. For those of you not familiar with what we're looking at exactly, Jim is the name of the earthworm, and his body is actually a suit that he controls when he's in the cockpit. There's just a couple times in the game where you actually get separated from the body for brief sections, and it's really cool they made this distinction so clear and in a clever way. It's just bursting at the seams with imaginative design, wide-spanning levels, and I have to say it again, mind-blowing animation that completely brings this character to life. They gave him several idle animations. No, not a couple, not a few, several, and they're fascinating. I simply cannot get enough out of this guy and his game. While there's been plenty of concepts that were ridiculous and random for the sake of being ridiculous and random, Earthworm Jim sings deeply of passion and genuine creativity. It really makes you want to see everything that can happen to your character, even if it's causing damage. The enemies are all different and bizarre themselves too, with wild sound effects, and just play into the game's overall experience that will continue to surprise and keep you on your toes. The level layouts are really interesting and well done, as there can sometimes be more than one way to get to the end of it, or at least several secret nooks to find or hooks to swing across in order to reach some extra ammo, plasma gunshots, and health replenishment. Watching him swing around, you might be wondering, what did he just use to whip that hook with? And yes, you saw it right, he grabs himself out of the suit with his hand, and Jim himself is now the whip in motion. How freaking unique and cool is that? And yes, he uses his head to climb as well, so he can always keep his trigger finger ready at all times. That whip with your head is also one of your main attacks, the other being your gun with an abundant amount of ammo. Not only capturing a great stance and facial expression, but it appears they even rapidly alternate sprites to create this magnificent lighting effect that you simply do not see much place else. It's a game that absolutely reminds you that 16-bit isn't just an old graphical design, but when it's executed to hand-drawn perfection, it's a timeless aesthetic that will never go out of style. Earthworm Jim is not only gnarly with its audio and visual design, but its layouts and challenge as well. New Junk City is your first area, and between your ravaging barking dogs that yelp with pain as you shoot them into a pile of bones, then dive-bombing screaming crows, it gives you plenty to deal with and a lot to maneuver around to figure out. But this is only the beginning of the game. They even have a trash can tire boss, Billy the Bin, that stomps to drop anvils because, you know, why not? And then he rolls around in his final phase, gunning him down. You receive this compliment, very cool. Yes, this is very cool. The level ends with a ridiculous boss named Chuck that operates this city-sized junkyard, and he's up on the crane with his gut, little hat, and overalls. And if anything about this boss seemed too ordinary for you, don't worry, the fever dream influence doesn't take long to show its head again. Yeah, he's violently vomiting trout at you. After several hits, he actually never stops, and it's up to you to use your spatial awareness and timing to land the final blow. God, this game is so awesome. So next we have Asteroids, which is actually a really important aspect of the game, as you need to race this giant bird with a space helmet and jetpack who goes by the name Psycro. Man, they just kill it with these puns. The reason why this stage is so important is because it serves as a bonus round between the stages. If you can collect 50 or more of these bubbles and win, you are rewarded with another continue, which is huge because this game doesn't have passwords or saves, and it's not the shortest game around by any means. Plus, it's far from easy. As you would expect, avoiding the rocks gets more and more difficult as you visit Asteroids virtually between every level from here on out, so you get around half a dozen chances at earning a continue, although doing it on the last two is extra challenging, with less of those fuel pod bubbles to grab, many more rocks, and I just so happened to get footage of snagging 50 bubbles but barely losing on one of these later attempts. And you might assume that means you have to try again or that you simply don't win anything, but no, losing in Asteroids presents you with a boss fight against Psycro himself. Yep, out here in space, shooting his hook weapon down and having to whip him several times for him to finally retreat, and then you can move on. Let's briefly talk about the rest of the game, as we do have 2 games to cover. So next one is called What the Heck, and you'll see it takes place in Hell. Another play on words. So this is such an interesting level for a few reasons. First of all, you may wonder, what is that in the background? Well, we'll get to that. Secondly, the music starts out all menacing and evil, as you would expect to match the settings, and you're quick to encounter super scary ghostly monsters with giant teeth that fly all around if you get too close. But at some point, the dramatic music makes a record needle screech and gives you one of the most chilled little songs you've ever heard. It's just so unexpected, and that's what this game is. You have to expect that the game will continue to surprise you. There's quite a bit of platforming and running around to avoid fire, landing a few consecutive whips in a row, or whipping turn wheels that operate gates that you need to quickly run underneath. Eventually you'll come up to a new enemy, and what else could we expect on here? Lawyers. God, taking deep morality shots at the profession of law. This game is just rich. Not only is the concept funny, but they're actually well designed, where they use their briefcases to block bullets, and they're also full of documents that they throw at you, so you have to whip the case away before you can shoot. Eventually, after floating on some of what I can only assume are giant sapphires, we come to one that we have to run on in order to bring us to the next point, and we eventually reach another mini-boss, and what should we expect in hell? A snowman. Because why not? It's Earthworm Jim. This guy blows you down with fire if you don't keep up with his pace and whip him as soon as he appears, and you might be wondering, what's his name? It's not Frosty, but Rusty is the name you're looking for. What I can really appreciate about this part is we get some more foreshadowing of the boss, which I love, as this evil cat appears to throw a bomb that results in the ceiling dropping several waves of spikes. Before long, we go toe-to-toe with this guy, and this cat's name is literally Evil, and he runs the planet of Heck. We encounter him after being warped. Somehow we've been separated from our suit and we are cornered, needing to jump over the booming fire gun that Evil has, and it's not obvious at first what to do, but you'll eventually notice that these fire shots are melting away the very support beam that Evil is above, so after several jumps we are able to get our suit back. The game makes a great Mortal Kombat reference with the words "finish him," as we have a final standoff with Evil, and we need to react quickly to him jumping out of the dark to claw us to a bloody pulp. Each time you shoot, he has an angel that floats away and you'll notice it has a number on it. You might see that and wonder where they're going with this. How many times do we need to shoot this guy? 9 times, for the cat's 9 lives. This game is just sheer win. I mean, what else is there to say? And we're only 2 levels into it. I know I just talked about being brief after level 1, but when looking at a game like this, it deserves the time, it deserves the attention to detail, and it deserves the respect. But alright, I will try to get it as concise as reasonably possible going forward. In Down the Tubes, we're underwater and met with a superbly funky track with just a badass bass line. There are giant dogs walking around like security, and you cleverly use Jim's wormy head to hold onto the bar as he uses his other hand to pick up his own ass. I would be lying if I said I could tell you what these are. At a few points you unleash a giant hamster that you ride on in order to get through some enemies you couldn't harm yourself. And man, as weird as this is, as the game has clearly been brilliantly absurd thus far, it has earned the right to sometimes just be downright outrageous. This level continues on in a part 2 with a much different way about it, as you need to carefully but quickly jet your way through the rocky caverns from one oxygen station to the next, and then a solid 99-second section that will absolutely have you holding your breath as you try to get to the next point in time, but also without busting your glass on the walls. As you can see, I barely made it, probably one more smack away from having to redo this whole thing. The level ends in another truly unexpected way. You might be expecting quite the boss fight, but nope. Literally just a goldfish in a bowl that you need to knock over in order to move on. His name is Bob the Killer Goldfish, and I guess since it's required, he deserves to suffer. We've got another play on words with Snot a Problem, where we are bungee jumping alongside a big ball of evil snot, and our life meters are represented by the condition and thickness of our lines, where ours is of course a rope and his is snot. The psychedelic influence is real, and we have another bass-driven melody that kicks total ass with its overall line, the drums, and accompanying keyboard-sounding tunes. You may notice at the bottom, we have an eye sticking out of the water and/or toxic waste dump, and we get to see what creature that is soon enough. You actually have 3 rounds against this guy, each one gets considerably more difficult. After round 1 is when we will see that this eye belongs to a beast that can bite us into 2 for an immediate death. The strategy here can be quite fluid, as it depends greatly on what your opponent, Major Mucus, is doing. But the goal is to get him as close to the wall as possible so you can shoulder check him repeatedly. When he's spinning all around, that is generally when you want to steer clear of him. By the 3rd fight, things really can get quite difficult and tricky to get him where you want him to go and hit him enough. You can see here that I managed to blow an early lead already, and almost did it a 2nd time, but was barely able to close it out. So, Earthworm Jim has taught us so far to expect the unexpected, and with that logic, and as explained by t-shirts or memes of the past, Expecting the unexpected would make the unexpected the expected, so with that in mind, I'm absolutely expecting some crazy ass name at this point, and I'm ready for it. So what do we have? We get level 5. Okay, Earthworm Jim. I mean, you win. There's simply not a point where you can put this game under your thumb and think you have it figured out. It just keeps you guessing. Level 5 is a long one, with a lot of insane stuff going on, as there's an evil scientist with a monkey growing out of his head around here to stop you a few times. Big emphasis on the mad scientist laboratory theme going on here with a bunch of weird enemies floating around, and even a point where you're secured in a caged ball and have to defend yourself from an onslaught of amoebas. And as if things can't get any more nuts, you have to phase off against Robot Chicken. This is back in 1994, so it's pretty hard to say, unless you suspect a sheer wild coincidence, that this unaffiliated show full of a bunch of random skits and wild humor didn't get any type of inspiration from this, but my guess is that at the very least, Seth Green played this game before. After whipping the target when it's above the chicken enough times, you warp to a dramatic and bottomless fall down a shaft with this thing, where you need to whip or shoot while avoiding contact with his body, and also the subsequent bombs that it drops as you hit it. After several hits, these bombs actually become missile legs, which of course only makes sense. Sixth level is another one from out of left field, with For Pete's Sake, which is another clever play on words because we have to do a lot this next level as we protect and escort this puppy named Peter to the finish line over and through various enemies and gaps. You have to whip Pete to clear bottomless pits while also getting quick shots in with your gun in order to clear the path. And although the level is called For Pete's Sake, since you're doing everything for his safety, you're definitely doing it for your own sake, since any fall or harm towards Pete, he mutates into a giant angry form of himself to beat up on Jim and move you back to the last checkpoint. It's definitely not an easy level, where nothing less than extremely quick and tight with your actions will get you past all of the insanity that the stage has laid out for you. Aside from all of the gaps and enemies to avoid, you even have intermittent meteor showers where you have to hold your ground and shoot into the sky to keep you and Pete safe. It's just a total trip. Even platforms that are set out for you to be used have to be handled with the utmost of care, otherwise simply trying to follow is going to throw your little buddy back off the ledge. Important to mention, we also get another glimpse of that cow we launched on level 1, and it's not the last we will see of that. At the end, they even have an optional harder mode, which is honestly more for pride's sake than anything. But today we will just finish the level and come back to face that hard course another day. We are getting toward the end of the game here, and this is an exclusive level to the Genesis original, Intestinal Distress. Which is what it sounds like. We are definitely in some intestines, and I kid you not, it absolutely appears that we have balls of shit rolling towards us. I mean, what else are they supposed to be? It's a pretty cool layout where you get shot out of tubes, you have to sling your way across gaps, have some climbing as well, and after navigating this intestinal tract, you've got this anthropomorphic organ that goes by the name Doc Duodenum, who spits out deadly bile as he jumps around, making fart and burp sounds everywhere he goes. Couldn't help but look up his name in Google, and duodenum is the first part of the small intestine immediately beyond the stomach, leading to the jejunum. Well, that's awesome. Remember to comment or like if you learned something today. He's a pretty weird boss that can corner you and spam his fluids until you die, but if you get a good rhythm down of shooting and moving immediately, he's not too bad to keep this going until it's all finally over and we're on our way to the last level of the game. The first section of Buttville is known as the Descent, and the following theme from the Robot Chicken fight is back, and it fits perfectly. You have to tap the jump button repeatedly to use your helicopter head abilities that slows your fall, and avoid razor-sharp thorns that kill you super quickly. It does take getting used to, but to be fair, it's not really a matter of memorization. Of course, being able to anticipate what's coming is great and helpful, but quick and clean reactions are enough to get you through this, although I did get a fair amount of footage of dying this time. Getting to the main part of the last level, the Queen's Lair, is just jaw-dropping. It looks incredible, and the music, man! Yippee! Yippee! It has you wondering if they were capable of creating anything less than outrageously superb music. It just fucking rocks. They really brought the challenge on this last level full force. There are annoying insects and hides all over the place. Weird little green faces with giant zigzag tongues, and these stupid assholes that hide in the back and pop out to cut you in half. It may even take you a moment to realize that you can kill them with your whip, although the gun does not. They're so tricky to bait out and they're tough to predict. Just need them to cooperate. And it doesn't help that the things you're standing on are slick and you slide off left or right if you're just still for more than a second. They don't hand this over to you easily at all. And getting this far in your typical playthrough, you spent well over an hour to get here, so getting a game over at this point sucks. You eventually make your way past all of these insanely tense moments. To go along with the theme of Buttville, you are at the end of the Queen's giant ass, whipping it as quickly as you can while avoiding those spikes on your left. And I kid you not, I am literally on my very last life here. I have 0 continues, 0 lives at this point. I'm honestly somewhat yelling at myself because I can't believe it got to be this way, but there's only one thing to do now, and that's to focus the best I can to close this out. You have a couple of circling platforms to transition between, and I even slipped off, barely getting back on with any percent left, and well, here we have it. On the final boss, we are circling this thing, and I even have a foot off the platform, and I'm nervous as all hell. I'm emptying thousands and thousands, thinking she's gotta die soon. She's just gotta die soon. And you know what? After all that time emptying bullets, I'm running low on ammo here, and although your gun replenishes ammo, it takes time, and that's of course when I get hit with some crazy shit and be forced to start this run all over. So as I'm coming back around the way, I put all of my hope into one last whip. The Queen blows up as you can see her guts, and just like that, you have rescued Princess What's-Her-Name, which is literally her name, and just when things were finally looking up for Jim, where he might reward his efforts, the game ends with the most ridiculous cherry on top, the cow you launched from level 1. Earthworm Jim is a creative masterpiece with an outstanding and timeless visual design. It has an amazing, hard-hitting soundtrack that is even great to listen to on its own, while also putting up a serious challenge from the very start and as you get further and further along. How can you even follow up a game like that exactly? Well, in November of 1995, only a year afterward, we received just that. Earthworm Jim 2 came back, rocking as hard as ever, with little differences. Jim used to look pissed off and full of attitude. Now he looks more silly, and as if he's anxious with a sense of urgency. He even has a new goop sling that you can use by pressing the jump button in the air, and hitting the shot button allows you to use it in a parachute type of fashion. As much as there was to unpack from Earthworm Jim 1, you would be amazed at the shocking variety of content with Earthworm Jim 2. As the style of the game actually embraced different themes with totally new game modes, each as ridiculous and wild as the one before it. While the first game was absolutely absurd, I would say it was even goofier than before. Not to say that it's downright more creative, but it's definitely at least as ridiculous and insane as the first game. Anything but tangerines? What kind of level name is that? They did a nice job opening up with another level that's all about wide-spanning and creative platforming, along with another sick and juicy funky rock track. The grungy, tough edge from the first game, you'll notice as you move along, isn't quite the same as the game is more silly than it's been, which it will not hesitate to show you over and over as we go along. Like, there are a couple of sections on the first level where you use one of those automated chairs that are used in the homes of the elderly or handicapped to assist with going up and down stairs, and you have to slow down or speed up in order to avoid falling old ladies. What is even going on right now? They even have ridiculous hazards such as an electric chair or coffin. Which reminds me to comment on, the sound effects from Earthworm Jim are still really, really good. He's got a few more things to say, and I think he sounds great during all of it. They're not afraid to piggyback off of the Goldfish and Mortal Kombat reference for one more laugh, and that's the first level. Instead of seeing Jim say groovy, they make it clear that there's a real infatuation with cows, and I can tell you now, it's not the last that we'll see of them.
Well done.
Things get slowed down quite a bit with Lorenzen Soil, which is apparently another play on words and a reference to some movie from 1992, along with the name of one of the directors. You're in a long and winding cavern where you have to shoot out rock around you in order to have the ground pile up underneath you. That way you can make jumps and navigate the course to reach your next time bonus. While this level can be a bit confusing at some points, it's nice that running out of time isn't an automatic death at all, just takes a solid amount of damage. It's another weird one with ants, some ants that are carrying and throwing babies, okay, and the big larvae on a unicycle to take down at the end. God, what are these people on? Holy crap. Depending on what kind of player you are, you may have not enjoyed how much they slowed things down with how long the level was and its pace. But they did another great job with matching a really suitable track, and some may even argue that it's just chill and fun to play through. The bonus level formula is back, but it's every 2 levels, although we will just go over it this once, and instead of Asteroids, we have Psychro throwing pink puppies that look like Pete. Oh hey, there's Pete, so the gang's all here, and it's up to you to make sure that this big marshmallow's in the right spot to bounce these puppies from one end to the next. It's reminiscent of the Game & Watch game Fire, which has been a concept that's been redone and repeated a few times in gaming, and for a bonus level, it definitely works out. The settings and surroundings are cool, And the way this actually works is opposite of what you might expect. You actually want to keep the bombs going when Psycho finally throws one. You want to bounce it across to the house because Pete will actually react and throw it back across the way. While this game is fun, the animation is cool, and there's a lot of challenge to be had as you reach this type of bonus level several times in the game. They do take a surprising amount of time, and I mean a lot of time, which I'm not even saying is a huge problem because the challenge itself is fun and the whole package of this is enjoyable. It just goes on for several minutes each time, and I think they definitely could have refined this a bit more, boil it down to a bit less. At least that's how I feel, thinking of the fact that there are no saves or passwords, and if you ever want to play through this game regularly, you have a solid 15 minutes of this going on. But just like Asteroids, it has the potential to be really helpful if you can snag the continue can, just like in the first game. Alright, so we've got the weird dial turned somewhere between outrageous and absurd, and hey, I guess that's the only explanation we needed. So we are floating through what kind of looks like a living creature, but there are also a lot of bumpers, as if it's a pinball game, along with sheep that we have to shoot with our gun. Alright, so pencils are a consistent part of the courses for whatever reason. You control pretty heavy, but basically holding down your button is what helps you float, and as soon as you let go, you fall. So it's just a matter of getting used to the fine balance required in order to navigate with some accuracy, and they certainly won't let you by without taking damage for anything less than precise. There are a couple of forks in the road where you can do the hard course that has a few more rewards for you to pick up, and those are actually used at the end of the level, which we will talk about. Overall, a very strange but pretty fun level, with the classical sonata going on in the background, and there are some resting points that just kind of let you look and consider how weird of a game you really are playing. Toward the end, you get to a version of Simon Says that will reward you based on how many you can get in a row, and they definitely aren't afraid to string together quite long sequences. So the worms you've been picking up, those are used in this game show setting as they float over to what looks like a meat grinder, what the heck, and the questions are at least as ridiculous as you could expect, where choosing the right answer kind of comes down to a guess because, I mean, how are you supposed to answer any of these with confidence? But anyway, we do the best we can for some reward and then get on our way to the Flying King. Here we get another complete change-up, and it's a level that I'm positive has been the end of a ton of players. It's a pretty weird and frustrating level, although we can praise how different the gameplay and style is, definitely getting all the variety in Earthworm Jim 2. The music is cool, but it's just pretty different compared to what we're used to from the first game, for example, but it's the Cuban Pete theme from The Mask, apparently. So it's a surprisingly long section of having to bump this bomb attached to the hot air balloon, but there's a lot of crap out there to wear us down with damage and or slow us down. The perspective and depth perception can make it kind of weird when avoiding these people getting catapulted towards you or the big cannonballs from the pirate ships. There are also some UFOs along with some goop to wear you down, and you'll definitely want to shoot these guys, although you have to be extremely careful, otherwise you'll detonate your own bomb. And you know what that means, going all the way back to the beginning to get it again, and having to go through all of this annoying shit you just made it through. It's definitely not the easiest thing out there at all, and there's no cap on just how much time a level like this could take, just with everything out there to get you and the things that can go wrong. You have to be calculated and smart about when and where you bump the bomb, and things can get pretty out of hand and aggressive the further you go, so you'll be hanging on to dear life the best you can with barely any health left, but there's just so much out there that can end it for you. After what can be an absolute eternity and nightmare, you bump that bomb into place and it's finally time to shoot it to take down your old buddy Major Mucus. Next stage is another play on words, Utterly Abducted. It's named as such because we need to complete multiple sections of picking up and moving cows to a barn so they can be milked and used as a counterweight to open the next gate, all while avoiding UFOs that are here to make your life awful if they can steal the cow as you're trying to move it where it needs to go. Where do you find the cows? Well, out of flowers. And the challenge can also be going to the right flower, since you only get a cow once it's next in the sequence. So it's definitely a level where practice and knowing ahead of time where things are could help make this quicker. But speaking of that, although they have you walk incredibly slowly with the cow, you can get around this design by just jumping all of the time. That helps you move around 3 times faster than intended, no joke, and it's a good thing for that, otherwise I would start to lose some patience here, as they give you plenty of sections and cows to gather. Even stranger yet, some of the cows actually come out with a fuse on their head, so you need to make it to the nearest giant bathtub to dunk them so it can go out before going to the barn. Aside from the UFOs, you also have udders that float around and act as ships that shoot at you, so it's another minigame style level, and it can definitely take some time, but it's pretty cool to figure out you have to move around in some pretty nifty fashions in order to get the job done. Even loading them into a cannon and using your goop to cross the gap yourself. It's pretty neat. The minigame style continues with Inflated Head, and it's just as it sounds. You use air spots to get started floating through the air, while you can toggle between inflating and deflating to control yourself. You do only have one speed to ascend and a couple to descend, but momentum definitely plays a huge role in how you navigate a level like this. While getting used to the control and making your way upward through the course, taking damage from the light bulbs is certainly a thing. Most of them aren't too horrible to avoid, and they only do a standard 10% of damage. Where the real issues start are when Evil the Cat, we remember him, comes back and pops out in some really annoying ways to send you back over and over and over until you can finally squeeze past him, and this is tricky with how fast he can pop out while you're trying to make the most of your floating speeds, which are pretty heavily momentum based. There are a fair amount of checkpoints, so it's not unrealistically cruel or anything, and even with the last part of Evil constantly helicoptering his way to the top of the screen before pouncing, he is pretty easy to avoid since he will be coming down wherever he was at the top of the screen, so very easy to anticipate in that way. Even though he is sent multiple times, we're getting pretty far into the game, so this is far from the most difficult things we have done up until this point. Just as worms have been used for a bonus game in the past, instead of a game show this time, they're used as tries to get some items like health replenishment, and now we're on our way to ISO 9000, which may be one of the most deep and depressingly relatable stages you've ever seen, which will become more clear as we make it to the end. So ISO 9000 has even been referred to as the planet of paperwork in some manuals. Jim encounters masked lawyers and accountants, with a couple of parts of needing to move a caged mouse into place to get machines working properly again, as this is apparently a reference to the rat race that is corporate America, and the giant machines can only work if it has the right people in their cages, which is some crazy symbolism to have, and believe me, it'll even be more in your face in a second. Gameplay-wise, the control in this stage is surprisingly realistic for what they were going for. It's not an ice level feeling, but you do start out slower when running because that's supposed to be the paper underneath you slipping around as you build up your speed, which makes sense. According to the manual, Jim was tricked to go to Planet Paperwork by Psychro to fill out his ISO 9000 forms in order to renew his Class C pocket rocket licenses, and that's why Jim must navigate through all of the lost paperwork, printer jams, incorrect forms, blast furnaces, and this is supposed to symbolize Jim simply trying to find the right office and the right forms to get this to happen. But there's just so much legal bullshit to go through, and that is just a genius concept. But where things get a little spine-tingling is at the end of the level, as Jim is simply trying to chase the exit door to get out of all this paperwork and rat race madness, but as he gets closer to the door, it always runs away from him, never being in reach. No matter what you do, you can't catch it, and on top of that, you have aggressive out-of-control file cabinets chasing after you. It symbolizes what you might expect, the hopelessness in trying to get out and find your exit, and some even say it relates to simply trying to get to the end of the workday, but it feels like you never can with the amount of work that you always have left to do. It's deep for sure. The way this level ends is just bizarre, and I wish I could say that there was more of a meaning and significance behind it, but you literally just put this dresser in a place that the door will run past so it can trip, and that's how you catch up to the exit door and leave this place. The game definitely lightens things up. They were very straightforward with this one. Called Level 8, of course a play on words since now we're on the 8th level and it's food themed. Like we're out here to enjoy a big grill session, and I can absolutely get behind that. After all of the mini-games and strange designs, it's kinda nice to get back to the straightforward platforming level. Well, as straightforward as they come for Earthworm Jim anyway. You may have noticed, for most of the level, you have a salt shaker chasing you and a bunch of enemy straws in your way. If you ever need to get more space from the salt shaker, you just turn and shoot at it, so it's not too tough to stay away from. Continuing with the barbecue theme, you even have hot grills that you need to cross, and when turning off the heat isn't an option, you actually have to shoot and crack eggs so you can jump on those in order to cross. Pretty interesting. Some sections that you'll have to be wary of sharp forks and do what you can to avoid those, such as landing on the occasional meatball or stack of ham. You'll eventually warp to and reach the boss, and this guy's name is Flamin' Yawn, another play on words of course for filet mignon. And the fight can be a bit frustrating since he constantly sends down his tray, or he also hops down and shoots fire, but you're fighting him on a pizza, and it actually has you sinking like quicksand, and not only does that slow you down, but you can actually die from this as well. And since you're constantly jumping to stay safe, it can make the timing extra difficult when Yawn actually comes down to blow fire, which is when you need to quickly shoot him, and after we do this at least 10 times, we are on our way to the final level in the game. See Jim Run, Run Jim Run. This is actually another reference to the book See Spot Run from the 70s, and a reason for that reference is because of course we're going to do a lot of running in this level. We need to beat Psychro once and for all, and they do not make this easy whatsoever. One thing specifically about this level I will definitely compliment that I noticed compared to the rest of the game, Jim runs much closer to the edge of the screen, where you can't see a ton of what's in front of you, but they fixed that in a great way here, so you can at least see what's out there and get a real heads up to react in time. And when trying to learn this level, you'll almost certainly fall behind, and I'll talk about why. But when you do fall behind, he can lock a few different trap doors behind you where these giant red balls are triggered and will test your ability to stay out of harm's way, as each one takes 20% of your health, so only 5 hits is enough to end it for you. While this first one is somewhat easy enough to adapt to, the second trapdoor is horrendous. Like, I just didn't feel as if I had enough space to get out of the way at all. I got smoked here several times. And this is when I realized you do not want anything to do with these sections and you have to figure out how to beat Psychro. A couple obstacles always seem to slow you down, like the doors in your way, where you stop to whip through them, often letting Psychro back in the race. Plus there are those propeller things that won't let you pass, so you have to stop to shoot them down. Your bullets can very briefly slow down Psychro, but not repeatedly in a row or anything like that. The major breakthrough and complete game changer you need to realize is the unbelievably efficient jump whipping, as it changes everything about the race. And as you get tight with timing, you will be able to leave your opponent in the dust at several points. There's even one propeller that's not spinning towards you, and this is probably here to see if you're paying attention. With those two strategies in mind, it changes everything, but it's far from in the bag, as there are a few bottomless pits that can and will absolutely be the end of your run. Some of them are surprisingly long and demanding of your jump too, so unless you nail it in stride, you're back at the beginning, because this couple-minute race has no checkpoints. Sometimes you can even get screwed with bad collision if you use your goose sling at the wrong time, or for no good reason at all, which absolutely sucks. They even place a horrible weapon in your way on purpose, which is basically the end of your run as you know it, since it can't do anything to what you're trying to shoot down and wastes a bunch of time. You might wonder, why not just change your weapon? Maybe this should have been mentioned earlier, but this is the first time it shows its head as a serious problem. In the Genesis original, even with a 6-button controller, you cannot even switch your weapons, which is pretty ridiculous. They give you a weapon that you literally can't use and it wastes time. You pretty much lose at this point. They did fix this for the other ports. There are definitely some moments of straight bullshit to be had, which doesn't necessarily equal fun, but by the end of it, you definitely have the whole race down to a science, and it's fun to motor through such a test with confidence. When I did finally win on this run, it really wasn't by much at all, and with no continues left. I was super relieved because I was definitely running out of time. How could something like this end? Well, Jim calls a cab, and there you have it. The ending credits prove further just how obsessed with cows these creators really are, as each character on screen reveals that they are actually cows themselves. What the heck? Overall, Earthworm Jim 1 and 2 are both completely outrageous concepts that were fully realized, and many would say that these are two of the best games for the system. Preferring one over the other is just entirely subjective, and I could see the argument either way. If you're a big fan of a perfectly executed, gnarly, grungy adventure with heavy emphasis on platforming skill with a great racing bonus game concept, plus a major, cool, tough kid on the block vibe, the first game is definitely for you. If you are more of a fan of sheer absurdity and enjoy the minigame formula with more variety than the first, plus you enjoy quite a bit more laid-back feeling, while still being crazy and difficult too, then Earthworm Jim 2 might be the game for you. Either way, they're both absolute must-plays, and I hope this video at the very least showed you why these two wacky games from the mid-90s were such commercial successes and still have a very strong and dedicated cult following today. There really is nothing else out there like them. Earthworm Jim definitely deserves more respect these days, and at least belongs in some kind of Hall of Fame such as Smash Bros or something like that. With his unique style and moveset, he would make a great character. And if you're a big Earthworm Jim fan wondering why I didn't talk more about other ports or some of those hidden levels in these games, until now anyway, I guess that just really drives home the point that talking about these games at length are nothing short of opening a big can of worms.